Yeah, it's kind of all I've heard too, where everyone is either like whatever about this movie, or they're like, Scoob ruined my childhood. This movie is the worst because apparently there's like some weird Simon Cowell just cameo in there, and they go to space at some point. Just very bizarre. But yeah, I can't say I'm like with like Trolls and this, and then like The Hunt and like all these other movies that have come early. Like I'm in the mode now where it's like, it's $20 is kind of a lot. I'll wait till it's like a regular streaming price or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm just an older dude, so maybe Scoob isn't pointed towards me, but it's just kind of there for me personally.
Yeah, you know what? I was on the fence with this movie in terms of renting it. I think it'd be fine to watch with, I guess, the family and stuff like that. But I was waiting to see how good it was because at that price of $20, it seems like a little bit much. And when the reviews were kind of mixed, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to wait till it drops to say the regular $6 rental price in a few months or so. And I think it'll be interesting to see how this movie does. I feel like this movie will do better than Trolls World Tour. I don't know why. I think that's just an inkling I have. I feel like it made a bit more of a boom in terms of social media. They had that massive TikTok challenge that garnered a total of 4 billion views across all the posts for it. I think that they just put a lot into promoting this film. And obviously, Scooby-Doo is a much more known property than the Trolls. So I do feel like this movie will do better on VOD than Trolls World Tour, and that'll be very interesting to look at. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm definitely going to wait for when the price drops.
Yeah, this is something that I probably would have been excited to see in theaters, but now that I actually have to pay like $20 to see it, I just didn't really have a desire to. And yeah, it's one of those things where I'll wait, and then hopefully in another month or so it'll be like $3 to rent on Amazon, and then I'll go ahead and check it out. But there's just not a big drive to go see it. And from what I've heard, is everybody's big complaint with this movie seems to be that it feels kind of like The Mummy in the sense that they're trying to cram all of these properties into one movie. So, like in the trailers, you already see like Dick Dastardly and some of the wacky racist characters, and apparently Simon Cowell cameos. Just like all these other Hanna-Barbera characters are just kind of crammed into the movie, from what I understand. And so that also somewhat kills my drive because when I go see a movie called Scoob, I would hope it would mainly be a Scooby-Doo movie. And from what I heard, this is not.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, isn't it? Because like you see the trailer for it, and I actually thought the first trailer was kind of cute because it's like that whole scene where Scooby and Shaggy like meet each other for the first time, and it's like you're like, this really isn't like this isn't my Scooby Doo, I guess is the way to describe it. But it looks kind of cute. But then yeah, you hear all this stuff about like I said, like going to space, and then you have all these different weird things. Like it's a very strange property to try to cram a bunch of stuff into. Like I know like everyone, I feel like everyone, even if they haven't watched like the cartoons growing up or anything like that, like I feel like everyone knows Scooby Doo. So like it feels kind of weird to be like, all right, we need to like build our Scooby Doo cinematic universe off of this movie. It just feels so weird to me.
Yeah, it's just another one of those films that is trying to obviously start something right away in the first movie, and I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I wonder how they'll do. I think that's the big thing. I think we're gonna have to wait a little while, see how they do in terms of dollar figures. I think that'll be the interesting thing. But overall, in terms of just this film in general, it seemed like the reception was this thing really didn't have much of a focus.
Yeah, and the other complaint that I've seen a lot of is the fact that most of the voice actors that have been voicing all the main cast, especially like Matthew Lillard, who's been voicing Shaggy pretty much since he played him in the actual live action movies, were kind of cut from their characters and recast without any of them knowing till it was announced. So I know that was like a big deal, and a lot of people, especially that are fans of like the older live action Scooby Doo movies and like the cartoons for the past 20 years, have been kind of upset with how they handled that transition.
I think that's kind of a low blow even. I feel like, I mean, they wanted to obviously go the theatrical route, and with that you probably need to throw some big names out there. Like obviously Zach Efron, Gina Rodriguez, Mark Wahlberg, who have joined onto this film. But I think that's kind of sad, especially when you look even at Matthew Lillard's kind of filmography and you look at some of his acting credits, and he was in Scooby-Doo content as recent as 2019. So I think that's kind of a sad scenario.
It is kind of weird when you see that, when you like, for like a lot of these animated movies where they just like don't like care about people who have been voicing those characters for a while. Like you see a lot of that with like the DC stuff, where all the DC animated things, and then they just kind of like, oh yeah, they're their own thing. Don't really worry about them, but we're gonna do something different for these movies. It's just weird. Like you have like a bunch of people who love that version of it, and I mean, I'm never one to be like, hey, like we need to do everything by the book and need to be as faithful as possible. But it feels a little weird when you're just like, nah, we don't need to worry about you at all. So it is very strange. And like, yeah, like I grew up on the Scooby-Doo movies. I don't really remember the second one at all, but the one thing I do remember is Matthew Lillard. Just really good in those movies. I feel like they're all pretty well cast. Like you got Linda Cardellini in there and Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. Like I feel like they're all like, it's a really solid cast, and you can say what you want about those movies, but it is kind of bizarre that they would be like, we don't really need to worry about these people anymore.
Yeah, I think, and kind of diving into those movies a little bit, I just kind of got on a Scooby-Doo kick when this weekend came out. I was like, you know what? I was looking forward to this movie, but I'm not $20 upfront payment looking forward to this movie. But fortunately, long ago, I owned the Scooby-Doo movies on DVD, and at some point must have converted them to digital. And so I watched them in my Voodoo library this weekend, and let me tell you, those are some bizarre movies, but I had so much fun.
Is Marvin Schwartz saying "what a picture" or no?
It was just the first one. I have a lot of issues with, because I think I like what's happening and I hate what's happening at the same time. But the second one is just the perfect amount of like goofy cartoon live action blend. It's wonderful. It was so much fun, and kind of like you said, like the cast is all just really, really good in it. Especially Matthew Lillard. Like he just kind of personifies that cartoon Shaggy that I grew up with. And so like you could convince me that was the same person that had been voicing him since the 60s, and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. And even just like Freddie Prinze Jr. and Linda Cardellini and Sarah Michelle Gellar are all just hamming it up and just having a good time. And I think the cast just keeps those movies from falling apart into complete unwatchable nonsense.
No, you're right,
totally.
100%. I think they're wacky movies. I remember the second one quite well. I remember that's the one I watched a lot growing up, and they are really wacky films when you think about it. But that cast really does hold them together, and they're all just wonderful in the movies, and they are fun to watch despite how zany they may be. Those are fun movies to watch.
Yeah, I'm the other way, where I don't remember the second movie at all. But like I remember the first movie a lot, and I'm kind of like Collin, where it's like I'm watching this, but I don't think I like any of this. But then also I do like this. It's very bizarre. It's kind of like how I feel about Capone, which we'll talk about later. But it's just like the few things that I do remember is, one, the cast. They're all just like, all those actors are just going nuts with it. They're just they know exactly what kind of movie they're in. And then the second part is just awful CGI. Because we were in that time where like CGI was like, oh yeah, we can do all this cool stuff, but we really still can't do all this stuff because it looks terrible. And so you have like all of like those just like very like proto CGI monsters, and then like in both of these movies, I feel like just Scooby-Doo just looks terrible. He's doing like all these crazy backflips and whatnot. I feel like it makes sense, right? Because they wanted to do something weird with that character, so like you really like can't just do a dog, and you don't want to do a CGI mouth like my favorite movie, Show Dogs. So like it makes a lot of sense, right? But yeah, most of it I remember weirdly is, guys, if you remember, like Isla Fisher is in that first one, right? And there's like that one scene where it's really bizarre. I feel like it hit me at the right age where this is like scary to me. But like they're like on like those mopeds in the jungle, and she gets hit with a branch, and then she's like a monster underneath, and it's just like her face just looks like one giant like gelatinous CGI noodle. And you're like, this is weird, but it's like it's also terrible. So what a bizarre movie.
Yeah, the first one just really irritates me because, so like when I was a kid, we didn't have Cartoon Network, but we had Boomerang. And so like I would watch all the like classic Scooby-Doo series all the time. And my favorite character was Scrappy-Doo. which if you've seen the first Scooby-Doo live action movie, they decided to make him the bad guy for some reason.
Oh,
And
that's right.
I'll never forgive James Gunn. I mean, I'm thankful for his other movies, but I'm always gonna hold that one against him. Just the biggest cartoon dog injustice of my lifetime. Taking them like the only like badass character in Scooby-Doo and just like turning him into a pea gag in his first scene, and then just a really, really weird villain for the rest of the movie. I'll never get over it.
Collin's over here being not my Scooby.
Before we
Scooby-Doo
wrap before we wrap up a little on Scooby-Doo, I do have a quick little tidbit that I think is hilarious. Tim Curry, it says here, he's a lifelong Scooby-Doo fan, and he was offered the role of this is in the first live-action Scooby-Doo. He was offered the role of Mandivarius, but he turned it down after learning the film would include Scrappy-Doo, a character he strongly dislikes.
Oh, now I have to hate Tim Curry too.
Incredible, Tim Curry, what a guy.
But I will say, like, the second one is definitely like a much lighter tone, but it's also a lot goofier. And then you have like Peter Boyle's in that movie, Tim Blake Nelson, or Alicia Silverstone. No, Tim Blake Nelson is playing a character who's also being played by Alicia Silverstone, which is just wonderful. Like, Seth Green's in the movie, and it's perfect. It's bad, but it's perfect.
I posed this question, like, I think it's interesting to talk about, but we talked about it a little before we came on here, but I feel like these movies are kind of like the Space Jam, like, for us, because they're like, it's like what, they're like 7-ish years after Space Jam, 7-8 years after those. And I feel like we've all started to come around and like, yeah, Space Jam's kind of terrible, but if you grew up with it, you're like, you're weirdly in love with it for some reason. I feel like that's kind of similar with these Scooby-Doo movies, because they're so, like, we all like remember them, I remember watching them, and we kind of fond memories of them, but we're also like, yeah, these things are just like not good, like, at all. I wonder if other people feel that same way.
I think so. I think that's a pretty good assessment.
Yeah, I think they have a pretty solid like cult following. I don't even know if you need to call it a cult following, because they were pretty popular when they came out. But I feel like everybody is pretty on board with these movies, even if they're not everybody's favorite.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like I think it all comes back to the cast, weirdly enough, because everyone's just like, I like Matthew Lillard a lot, and I feel like weirdly that's just like a defining like role for him in his entire career, because like, what else has he been in that you guys can think of? Like, I don't know,
Scream.
like oh yeah, maybe Scream, but weirdly my mind went to like Trouble with the Curve. Remember that movie? Like, I don't know, like, it's just, it, for some reason, like, this movie just hit, and I feel like nostalgia is obviously a big part of it, right? But yeah, I don't know why people just like these. And they made a lot of money, but yeah, they're just kind of like weird oddities of the 2000s. That just a really weird time in movies in general.
Yeah, so there were plans for a third movie in this trilogy, and because of the reception to the movie, they decided not to move forward with it. They did like a couple of Cartoon Network prequels that I remember being on when I was a kid. But, you know, I think we really need, before we get Guardians 3, I think James Gunn owes it to us to finish his first trilogy. I also like how these are kind of retroactively James Gunn's movies, even though he didn't direct either of them. I mean, he was the writer, but they just get really heavily associated with him as being kind of the person behind them, even though that's not entirely true.
I think it's time to start a petition for the third film.
I'm ready. I'll sign that petition. You got 1 vote.
You got 2.
Brennan, can we get 3?
There you go. We got 3. I think we're leaving the pod today with 3 signatures for Scooby-Doo 3.
And that's all they'll ever get.
So unless we have anything else to add on the illustrious movie career of Scooby-Doo, I think we can move on to the Netflix top 10 this week, which has been, I think it's been shaken up quite a bit. I mean, we still have a couple mainstays from the past few weeks, but I'm seeing a lot of newcomers on this week's list. So I'll just run through it real quick, and we'll touch on the movies that we feel are worth talking about, because unfortunately with Netflix, for every movie you want to talk about, there are like 20 that no one's ever seen. So in the number 1 spot this week, we had The Wrong Missy, followed by Public Enemies at number 2, John Henry at number 3, Have a Good Trip, Adventures in Psychedelics at number 4, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy versus the Reverend interactive movie at number 5, Extraction still in the top 10 at number 6, Despicable Me has been hanging out in the bottom half, still at number 7, The Willoughbys at number 8, The House at the End of the Street number 9, and Lockout number 10. So again, we kind of have our mainstays, Despicable Me, The Willoughbys, and Extraction, but The Wrong Missy is kind of the hot topic this week, and I know Brennan's a huge fan of this movie.
Oh God, you know what? There was a I think it was like halfway through the movie, and I was just sitting there. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna pay good attention here, and if I'm able to laugh more than 2 times for the rest of the movie, I'll up it half a star. And no, I couldn't get there.
Yeah, it's something, isn't it? Well, I was watching this movie, and it has all of the hallmarks of a Happy Madison movie, right? Where it's like you have all of Adam Sandler's buddies, his wife is in there. They all go to like a retreat in Hawaii or whatever it is, just a tropical island, and like they do like weird hijinks, and then there's a love story, and then the movie's over. 90 minutes. That's what like all these movies are. For some reason, I mean, this movie's not good, but like I didn't like have like the same anger for it. I don't know. I feel like for some reason it like looked like a movie, because like I feel like one of the good examples is, you remember in Jack and Jill when they're at like the basketball game and there's like 2 seats. It's like they have like a row of seats that they're showing that's supposed to be the basketball game that they're at, and it looks so cheap. But this one, like, it actually like looked like a movie. Like there was some use of shadow in there, and I was like, oh, look at this, it's very cinematic. But yeah, I don't know. It's really bad though. Lauren Lapkus is in this movie, and she's just incredibly obnoxious. I just feel bad for her because I really like her as an actress, but she's just going for it. And she's just like yelling the entire movie. Like, so the premise is like David Spade like has a terrible blind date with Missy, played by Lauren Lapkus. And it just goes horrible. And he meets another Missy later on, who's just like is supposed to be like his dream girl. They depart, and then like later he like texts Missy to go on his retreat. He's like, hey, why not? Like, let's see what happens. But then he texts the wrong one, and then hijinks ensue, and then the bad Missy comes, and then there's all that stuff going on. And he has to introduce her to all of the people in his firm, and they just do business stuff. Their firm, I thought, was really funny. Their firm name is Credit for America, or like something like that. It's just so generic. It's so funny. It made me laugh really hard. But I don't know. Like, so for some reason, maybe I was in a decent mood. This movie wasn't the worst thing I've seen from Happy Madison, which, like I said, is not a ringing endorsement considering the stuff they've made. But I don't know.
Here's a question for you guys. When do you think was the last time Happy Madison had a movie that would be ranked positive or fresh on Rotten Tomatoes?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with never.
I'm gonna go with, I'll say 10 years.
It's actually 11 years, so you're pretty close. It was 2009's Funny People, and that's only the second fresh movie that Happy Madison has ever produced. The first being Reign Over Me from 2007.
The funny thing is, all of their movies, and this is no secret. Like all the budgets are so incredibly inflated, like because they're all just like they're all getting paid up front, like all of Adam Sandler's friends. Like I'm looking at it now. Like I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry cost $85 million. Like You Don't Mess with the Zohan cost like $90 million. Like I think Jack and Jill was like a $70 million movie. Like it is just so crazy to see like how much they do this. But for some reason, like there's no like the Wrong Missy is number 1 this week. Like there is an audience for these movies, even though we might dislike them as strongly as we do.
We got a Halloween movie too coming this year from the Happy Madison team, coming in the fall. So looking forward to that.
Where's Grown Ups 3? Speaking of trilogies that need a conclusion.
I think it's about time.
But like, so I make fun of Happy Madison movies, but honestly, like I've seen the first Grown Ups so many times because I was in middle school when that came out, and so that was just constantly on Netflix too. So I've definitely seen most of these movies, even if they are almost all completely terrible.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat. I actually really like Funny People. I think People is a generally good movie. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really like. I have a soft spot for Grandma's Boy. I don't know why. You guys ever see that? For some reason, I just watched that a ton when I was little. Click, I kind of like. Um,
Yeah,
besides that,
we stand Click.
I think Paul Blart Mall Cop is just a meme goldmine.
That's true. It's better for the memes than the actual movie itself.
And I think there's weirdly some fun action sequences in that movie too. So I stand Paul Blart.
The Ridiculous Six? No, anybody?
I'll pass.
That's like the bottom of the barrel. But there are a few okay ones. Like The Longest Yard's like not a bad movie. Like it's you can watch it. It's watchable. I think 50 First Dates kind of falls in that too. Like they're not good, but I think there's some enjoyment to be had.
Yeah, it's true. The Benchwarmers hit me at a really like just a perfect spot when I was like still playing Little League baseball. And for some reason I just loved that movie so much. I saw it so many times as a kid. I feel like that is kind of like the audience for these movies where they're like 13-year-old boys, like 12, 13-year-old boys who just think like any dick joke is the funniest thing they've ever seen. I feel like that's like exactly what these movies are going for.
And just speaking of the Benchwarmers, that 2006 was prime Happy Madison. You had Grandma's Boy, the Benchwarmers, and Click.
The golden
great
years.
year.
You had I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry the year later. Just cinema at its finest.
And then the downfall began with Don't Mess with the Zohan in 2008.
And they never looked back from there.
And then Bucky Larson. You remember Bucky Larson?
I know it's one of the worst movies ever made, but that's about it.
I remember watching it, and I was still what? I was like 15 when that came out, something like that, and I hated it so much. It's so terrible. Oh my god! Just Nick Swartzen, just get him away from my face. It's just the worst. It's just the worst thing ever. Oh my god.
So yeah, that is and all of our Happy Madison stories. But then next up, we've already talked about Public Enemies and John Henry in the past couple weeks. So we won't make Brennan think through John Henry anymore. But Have a Good Trip, Adventures in Psychedelics is also high up there. I don't personally have a lot to say about it, but I know you guys had some thoughts.
Guys, what if, now stay with me here, what if we got a bunch of celebrities to talk about that one time they got really high? Isn't that hilarious? That's basically this movie. That's all that happens in this movie. So yeah, basically it's a documentary that I think was actually supposed to play at South by Southwest. So it's kind of bizarre, but it's a group of like comedy actors, like Rob Corddry is in there, Nick Swartzen is in there, Adam Scott, and like there's a bunch of other celebrity cameos too. Like Anthony Bourdain shows up, which was just surreal to see, and Carrie Fisher as well. Sting makes an appearance, but it's just a bunch of just conversations about them trying LSD or peyote or just any other psychedelic drug, and like just their stories that they've had. So there's like you hear that premise and you're like, this is probably pretty funny. And then you watch it and you're just like, oh, well, this is great, I guess. It's about as fun as any time anyone's explained being high to you is. It's just not very funny. Like it's like the very stereotypical like drug stories where people are like, oh, I melted into my bed and I couldn't move. Like it's like stuff like that, or it's like they're like, oh, what is time? What's happening to me? Like it's really not that fun, weirdly enough. And it's kind of like there's a little part of me that felt a little icky when I was watching like Anthony Bourdain and Carrie Fisher talk about hilariously talk about their drug encounters, because like both of them had like serious like issues throughout their life with drug dependencies, and they're now both dead. So that was like, I was like, I don't really know how I feel about this. This is all supposed to be pretty lighthearted, but I don't know. Like if you're really into LSD, maybe this is a movie for you. Maybe this is your Black Panther. But I don't know. It just I was watching this entire thing and I was like, why does this exist? I couldn't come up with an answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever really plan on diving into this movie at all. So this is probably my only exposure.
As you shouldn't. It's just I don't know. Like Netflix, like I feel like this is great for the algorithm because like they put this on the home screen and like they're like, what? They're talking about drugs? No way! This is sick. And then it comes up as fourth on the top 10 movies in the U.S. And then they may get more subscribers. But I don't know. Like they try to do like it's not funny enough because they're just like recounting drug stories and there's like animation that goes along with it, which is I don't know, fine. But it's not like educational enough. Like it doesn't like quite go deep into like what it's doing to your brain or anything like that. And it's not like good enough as like advocacy either. Like they try to do like, oh, like maybe this could like help people with mental illness or things like that. And they don't quite go deep enough on that. It's just kind of like listen to people you like talk about drugs, which I guess your mileage may vary on that, which mine did, obviously, because it was just like I just sat there and just kind of got annoyed after a while.
Yeah, so that was Nick's not so good trip with having a good trip.
I see what you did there. Jokes.
But then the bigger movie for me this weekend was the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt interactive movie, Kimmy versus the Reverend. So the show ended last year, and then they announced that they were doing an interactive movie after Black Mirror tried it and Bandersnatch really took off. So I started this movie Friday morning because I saw the runtime was an hour and a half, and I was like, all right, I can get through it. And then like I have to leave in a little bit, so I'll do this and then go on with my day. But I kept picking all the wrong answers. So an hour and a half later, I was like 25% through the movie. So I have yet to come back to it, but it just is really dumb and irreverent as the TV show was, and you get to like choose to be nonsensical. Like Daniel Radcliffe is in this movie, and like whenever you pick a wrong answer, they'll break off into like this little fourth wall breaking little couch scene where everybody like acknowledges that Daniel Radcliffe is Daniel Radcliffe except for Daniel Radcliffe. So they're like there's like a choice early on where you can choose to make him leave the story, and so then it breaks and it's like, and did we really get Daniel Radcliffe for that small of a role? And then all the characters like, yeah, that's messed up. And then Daniel Radcliffe's character is like, who is he?
I like that.
That's funny. I like that too. I like Daniel Radcliffe's post Harry Potter career because he's just like, I'm just going to do whatever I want because I have so much money, and if I think this is funny, I'm going to do it, even if it's like Guns Akimbo. Remember that movie? That came out.
Swiss Army Man is peak Radcliffe.
I agree. I'm full in on Swiss Army Man and his farts.
I think it's really interesting with like Radcliffe and Robert Pattinson because obviously Radcliffe was in it a lot longer, just like with how long the Harry Potter movies were going on. But you like see these two actors who started off pretty young, and then I guess even Pattinson was in Harry Potter. And just like after they made their money on the big franchise, they're just going out and doing weird stuff. And like Pattinson's at least doing like more complex psychological stuff, and then Radcliffe's just like in a corner playing with Legos, doing as weird of movies as he can find, and it's just wonderful.
He's doing what's that one movie he was in, the that Lego movie kind of ripoff?
Oh, what was that thing? We made fun of it for 10 years.
Playmobil movie.
The Playmobil movie.
Yeah, even I'd throw Kristen Stewart into there too after Twilight. I think she's gone off and done a lot of interesting things since that franchise. But just speaking of Daniel Radcliffe, I watched Jungle recently. Have you guys seen Jungle?
No, I haven't.
It's just like a movie, very very small movie. Came out in 2017 about a true story about someone who got lost for a couple weeks in a South American jungle, and he puts on, like, I didn't love the film. It was a fine watch, but he puts on a really good physical performance in that movie. I think you're right. I mean, he's had a really interesting career post Harry Potter.
So how about Kimmy Schmidt, like the thing itself? Like, is it like? 'Cause I remember, I think this is the first like interactive thing since Bandersnatch, right? So like, is it improved at all, or like, is it like fun, or is it just kind of like you pick something wrong and it's like, oh no, you can't do that. Sorry.
I think it's a little tedious because with Bandersnatch, like it was definitely a lot more meta, and so they fleshed everything out. Whereas with this one, like if you pick the wrong answer, then it'll just break off from the story, give you like a little funny way of saying you picked the wrong thing, and then you'll rewind and go do it again. Whereas like with Bandersnatch, it felt more like a maze you were getting deeper into. With Kimmy Schmidt, it feels like you hit a dead end, you turn around, and then go the way they wanted you to go. But like, I
That's
mean,
bummer.
I spent an hour and a half picking wrong answers, sometimes on purpose and sometimes just because I thought they were the right answers and they weren't. And it was just a lot of fun doing it. So would recommend. I'll probably try and finish it tonight.
Yeah, I'm wondering at some point, like, because I feel like both of these, like this and Bandersnatch, I feel like are both kind of like prototypes in this kind of like storytelling. I'm waiting for like some like really cool like some really cool creative person. I don't know, like a Guillermo del Toro or just someone just like off the wall to just like come in and be like, no, I want to do something interactive, and it like blows our minds. Because I feel like there is something untapped with all of this. Maybe it's just like crazy amount of possibilities. They don't tell you like no that's wrong, but like they keep like building off of it. So maybe that takes like I don't know like 10 years to make or something like that. But I think I'm still waiting. I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential in this way of storytelling.
You're right. I think there's definitely something there, and imagine that like a real like just big name director coming in and picking up a project like that. I think that'd be a really interesting thing.
I picture this a Happy Madison interactive adventure. You get to pick which of Adam Sandler's friends are in the movie. You get to pick which beach you go to.
Except it's just super lazy. So like every time you try to click something, it's like, nah, sorry, I don't have the energy to do that. Go back to the first one. Just click the fart joke option.
Yeah, so that is the Netflix top 10. Unless you guys have anything else to say about it, we could move on to what is probably the most talked about release of 2020 at this point. Just crazy reactions across the board for Capone. And Tom Hardy is rivaling his performance in Venom from what I've heard so far. And I've heard, and I haven't checked it out yet, but I've heard it's something that you just can't look away from.
Guys, Capone, holy fuck. I've seen this movie and can confirm it's just incredibly off the wall and insane. So I guess for people who don't know, the story is based off of Al Capone's last year of life. So he's just down in Florida, chilling in his big mansion. He was released from prison where he's there for like 10 years or something like that, and he has neurosyphilis, which is just like destroying his mind. So by the time you see him, like when you see Tom Hardy and the 10 pounds of makeup that he has on, he's just like already like probably like at like 30% of his mind. Like he has no idea what's happening, and he'll have like these like moments of like clarity where he has like a speech, and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Then it just gets worse and worse. So it's basically just Tom Hardy just going nuts for an hour and like 40 minutes or however long this movie is. I heard someone explain his performance, and it's like the best thing possible, where it's equal parts good and the worst of Marlon Brando, because he's like totally inhabiting this incontinent Al Capone who's just shitting the bed literally. That's not a joke. That happens in the movie. And he's like, at one point, like they're like, all right, no more cigars, because he's chomping on a cigar in every scene. So the doctor replaces it with a carrot. So he's just walking around with a carrot in his mouth. But it's just so bizarre to see this. Like Collin alluded to, I can't say this movie's good at all, but I could not. I just couldn't look like even like I think even in the good movies I have when I watch at home I have a bad attention span, so I have the desire sometimes to like just like check my phone, but like that was not the case with Capone. I just couldn't stop staring at all that was happening in this movie, and there's like multiple shitting scenes, and he's just like Tom Hardy just like yelling for like no reason. Oh my god, like Capone. Josh Trank following up Fantastic Four with a bang. It's something.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about for sure, and it's one that I definitely want to check out soon. And I mean, one thing you can't take from Tom Hardy, I mean, he really puts it all into pretty much every role he has.
Yeah, it's I don't even know. Like he, I can't tell if he's like trolling all of us with like some of his performances because I feel like he kind of has that in him as an actor where he's like, I don't care, I'm gonna torpedo through this movie and do whatever the hell I want. Like even like Mad Max, Fury Road, where he's just like he's kind of like insane, like the entire like even though I like that's like one of my favorite movies ever, but like the at the same time you're like, what is Tom Hardy doing in this movie? Like he's just kind of grunting. He's just like he's kind of grunting. But then in this movie, like apparently like him and Josh Trank are like best buddies now. Like they just like play video games together, which is something. But like he just like lets him loose, and he's just doing all these crazy ticks. He's like drooling from the mouth and like everything. Like his eyes are like absurdly bloodshot. Like the stuff like I guess like it's like a digital effect, but his eyes look like Anakin's eyes in Revenge of the Sith. they're so red and bloodshot. It looks insane, and he looks like a hilarious looking ghost this entire movie. Like he has so much makeup on. Yeah, I don't know. Like Josh Trank, just one of the strangest careers. Like he started with Chronicle, which I feel like everyone likes, and then Fantastic Four, which is just kind of one of like the worst like studio meddling jobs like ever, or at least of like the like this since 2000 or something like that. Just like everyone was like, yeah, this movie was just like destroyed to hell in post production. Then you have this movie, which is just like he's been saying how like this is the movie he wanted to make. He's really proud of it. And it's just like one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Like I feel like it's like legitimately the most insane movie I've seen this year. So I don't really know. I feel like I don't know if I have stock in Josh Trank as a director, but I am curious as hell for what he does next.
I'm a fan of Chronicle. I think that's a good movie. And Fantastic Four. I mean, obviously there's a lot of issues there, but yeah, you're right. I mean, good for him to be proud of this and just to kind of have this experience following just kind of what went on with it. Fantastic Four.
Yeah, there's a scene. I don't want to spoil this, but I'll leave people with this image. There's a scene. It's kind of I think it's kind of like the pivotal like final scene, but like so it's it includes a diaper, a Tommy gun, and a carrot, and that's all I'm gonna say.
I love
it
that
is
Bugs Bunny cartoon.
It really is like the voice he's putting on the entire time. It's so cartoonish, but also like there's like an ounce of like there's something to this. There's like a few moments in this movie where you're like there's something here. But then it's just like yeah, it gets back into just hilarity, and I can't tell if like it's intentional or not. It's the weird thing. Like it's the movie he wanted to make, like I said. So like there's a clearly like intentionality behind this, but it's just it's so weird. I guess the one thing it does do is it's really good at getting like like we have like these gangster like icons that we I don't know if we look up to is the wrong word, but we kind of like hold in some regard because they're I don't know it's like some combination of nostalgia and our fascination with crime or whatever like that. But I feel like this movie effectively gets rid of all of that for Capone because he's just an old dude just shitting in the wind. So like I feel like if the movie's successful at all, it's in that, or it's just like yeah, Capone is just he died just like this terrible, just disgusting man. So I don't know. Maybe that's what this movie's getting at. Who knows? It's something. I encourage people to check it out because it's so bizarre.
I'm in.
It's so weird. I can't get over it.
Um, so yeah, that's Capone, and then we've all been filling our theater-shaped void with older movies. I know Nick and I have been jumping through Criterion Channel a little bit. I did that for about the first half of the week and watched utter nonsense for the second half. So I started off with The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I'm not very big into German expressionism. Like I haven't seen that many films of that nature, but I wanted to check this one out because I'd heard a lot of good things about it. It's a really entertaining movie. I'm always kind of nervous with silent era movies because I mean there's no dialogue and you really have to be focused on everything that's happening or you're going to miss chunks of visual information being thrown out. But I really loved the set design in this movie for one thing, and then there's a pretty good twist at the end, and it was creepy and horrific in a way I didn't expect a 100-year-old movie to be.
Is it in good shape, the movie? Because I was watching The Lady of Shanghai on Criterion the other which I'm still working through, but you can see where some frames of it it's like the film was like struggling to hold on. But does it look decent?
It was in pretty good shape. You definitely can see parts of the movie where they clearly didn't have like a good frame for, because it'll just skip a frame or two. And then there are some parts where you'll see the holes come through. But overall, it was in pretty solid shape for how old it is.
I'm always fascinated by that, where it's just like these, because that there was like no like record keeping or anything like that with older movies, where it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like throw this film in like a bin and it's just gonna be somewhere. Like they had like they just did not keep like care of any of these. So it's always fascinating when you see like these highly regarded older movies that are like just like touchstones of just capital C cinema, and they have scenes where it's like, the film's about to rip apart. Like, hold on, movie. I always think that's interesting to look at.
Because you have movies like Nosferatu, which was, I believe, the same year, and like at one point, every copy of that movie was thought to have been destroyed, and then they just like found an intact copy in the 80s. That is like the version of it we can see today. So it's really interesting to see just like how some of these movies barely survived because nobody really thought anything of them.
Yeah, and even Brennan's favorite thing ever, the original King Kong. Like they've seen the spider sequence, and then they've tried to recreate it so many times. It is so fascinating to me. I mean, I'm sure it's like hindsight's 2020 at this point, right? Because we all love all of these things, but it's just so crazy to me. They were like, who cares? Just put it in the corner. I don't know.
No, you're right. It's an odd thing that they didn't really think about it. But yeah, that bug scene in the original 1933, there's just that one image of it because it was too haunting to audiences, so they cut it out, and then they apparently a lot of it got burned, right, and lost. But speaking of Kong, I'm going through a Kongathon right now, and I finally, for the first time ever, watched the sequel to the original 1933 film, King Kong, and it's called The Son of Kong. Now, this is just an odd thing. Imagine if we had this today. So the original King Kong comes out in March of 1933. Crazy success, biggest movie in the planet at the time. And then right away, the studio says, let's write, shoot, produce, edit. Let's put out a sequel within 9 months. And they did it. And the sequel came out in December of that same year. And I finally got to watch that yesterday for the first time. And it's a lot campier than the first one. I know, Collin, you saw the 1933 King Kong like in March, I believe, because it came back to theaters for a day or two. It's a lot campier than that because the 1933 King Kong is a little bit horrifying. Like the way they portray Kong is definitely much more villainous than he's portrayed in some of the more recent adaptations. But Son of Kong is a lot more campy and lighthearted. I don't know. It's just it feels like one of the most thrown together movies you'll ever see, and I think that's what happens when you shoot a movie in 9 months. But imagine that today. Like, say Scoob is a success. We're looking at this December or January with the sequel, right? Like it's a weird thing.
Yeah, what was the last example of that? Maybe like the Matrix movies, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
But they had filmed that in advance. They just filmed it all at once, right? They didn't.
Correct.
Yeah, even then, because they filmed, so they came out in 2003, but they both came out that year. So there was like a 4-year gap where they made 2 movies in between. 99 when the first one came out, and 2003 when they released them 6 months apart, which just seems really bizarre.
Yeah, like with
so
this,
strange.
they're not planning to do a sequel of King Kong. They're just like they see the success right away, and literally they're like, you know what, let's greenlight it, let's get a sequel going. And you know what, the movie's all right. I mean, I don't think it's that great. It's very like watching it, you just feel like why is this the thing? But the guy who plays Carl Denham, Robert Armstrong, he returns for the sequel, and he has a lot of charisma. He's solid. Collin, in my opinion, he's one of the stronger parts of the original 1933 film. Would you?
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, never having been a King Kong fan before, I think the 33 one still held up really well, just overall. Because there is like a lot of, I'm not a fan of the script because it's just kind of clunky, but like the effects and I think the characters all pop pretty well. So I'm a fan of 33. I don't plan on ever exposing myself to Son of Kong from what you've said, but
It's kind of like I feel like it's one of the original sequels nobody asked for, because like you think of now, even we were chatting earlier before we got on. You got like what Son of the Mask or whatever, and you got all these other movies like that. I think this is kind of like one of the early versions of that, Son of Kong. It's a movie like probably barely anyone has ever heard of as well, unless you're really into it. But yeah, it's just it's a weird movie to watch, and even like it seems so rushed. It's only 70 minutes. Like it's nothing.
I'm wondering, has there ever been a good movie that's like a sequel? It's like the son of blank. Like I can't think of anything that's like it's been actually good.
No, I don't know. That's something you
I don't
gotta.
yeah, I don't think
I'm
so.
gonna say no.
Yeah, I don't think so on that one. But it was weird. My week was spent. So I watched a bunch of just stuff throughout the week. I watched Doctor Strangelove for the first time, which was wonderful. I love that movie. I want to talk about what I watched last night, which is the classic musical Gypsy, which I don't think either of you guys have seen it, but it was really interesting, and I'm more fascinated by like. So I watched it with one of my really good buddies who's just really into musicals. Like I think between musicals, I think and westerns are like my two of my big blind spots in just movie watching throughout my life. So I'm just like I just left it to him. I was like, hey, I need to watch a musical. What do you want to watch? And he's like, oh, look, let's watch this Gypsy together. I was like, oh, okay. So we both we just like FaceTimed each other and watched this movie, and we both had our headphones in, so like the sound wouldn't we wouldn't hear we wouldn't echo between us, but it was really bizarre because I feel like it was the first time I'd changed my viewing habits through like quarantine to like hang out with people while also not hanging out with people. Um, so it was, I don't know if you guys have you guys done anything like that where you've like maybe you FaceTime someone or like you like watch it together and you're like texting the whole time. I feel like maybe people are starting to do more of that as this time goes on.
Yeah,
Yeah, me and my girlfriend, we usually pick a movie and then we start it at the same time, and yeah, text through it. I think that's a pretty smooth way to go about it.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to do it with stuff I haven't seen yet because if I'm with friends, I'm not going to pay attention. But like a couple friends of mine and I, we did like a Facebook hangout and watched Inglorious Bastards a couple weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. Even if it is kind of weird, just like propping your phone up the whole time while trying to watch the movie.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Like I was a little nervous about it, where I was like, I don't know, I've never really seen this movie, and like I don't know like if I'm gonna like pay attention at all. But I feel like musicals are a good way. Like I feel like because they're not like super plot based or anything. Like it's not like Primer where you're like, what the hell is happening in this movie? Where it's just like, oh, it's like song and dance, and then there's fun overacting in between dancing. I feel like it's a one of the better genres to do it with to do this and watch stuff for the first time. But as for the movie itself, that was the first time I'd seen Natalie Wood in a movie, and I feel like that's just like one of like the stars I've been putting off seeing for a long time. But you can clearly tell like how talented she was before she unfortunately died, in ways we still don't quite understand. But like she's great in the movie. Gypsy itself, if you don't know, is basically just it's one of those classic rise and fall in show business stories where it's there's this just over like their stage mom who's just overprotective and just in the middle of things, and like she's just like the ultimate like show business mom where she's just controlling everybody, and they have this act, and then the lead girl like leaves, and she's 13. This is kind of weird part of the movie, but she's 13. It's like, oh, sorry guys, I'm getting married. And you're like, wait, what? What is happening? And so she leaves, and then Natalie Wood takes over, and it's about her kind of coming into her own, and like she becomes like a burlesque dancer, and she becomes really famous. This is where the line "Mama, look at me, I'm a star" comes from. If you guys didn't know that, but really good to see her. The movie itself is like fine; it's pretty good, but it was just very bizarre experience for me. I feel like because I feel like we're all starting to get a little more creative. I know I saw some people last weekend at a socially distant gathering. So I feel like people are just trying to do basically whatever they can just to like talk to people and just not go crazy by themselves. So it was really fascinating. I thought I'd share that. It's just a very bizarre thing for me to do, but it was fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's nice. Like I've mainly just been playing video games online and socializing that way, or like just doing FaceTime or whatever. But yeah, I think especially like if theaters and stuff don't really open again, I think that'll probably be something I do more frequently now that we're going full into summer. And I mean maybe the drive-in, but nobody knows what's going on with that where I live. So
I think one interesting thing that they have is you have to go through Google Chrome to do it, but the Netflix Party ability, where you can, I don't know what the max is, but you can have a bunch of people in at the same time, and I think you have one person to control it, or everybody can control it, and you guys can essentially play and pause at the same time. And on the right hand side, there's a chat bar. I don't know if you guys have heard of that before.
I actually haven't. No, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's yeah, the movie's kind of just playing, and then just on that corner right side, there's the chat bar, and if anyone obviously needs to get up and do something or something, someone pauses it pauses for everybody. I haven't tried it yet, but I've seen people try it, and it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I'm a part of that physical media gang, so but yeah,
Collin isn't up for big streaming service.
I don't mess around with that. Actually, I do a lot, but I just even when I watched Inglourious Bastards with some friends a couple weeks ago, like I could have just pulled it up on Netflix, but it's more satisfying to go and grab it off the shelf and pop it in the player.
Okay, boo.
But yeah, that's my boomer moment.
Collin, you know what, Collin, it's great when you see the play, scene selection, extras, and all that. I love watching that. You're right. There is a different feel to it.
The smell when you open a new DVD, you don't get that when you open a new streaming app, But that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode. So we'll be back next week talking about our other recommendations, as well as just other movie stuff going on, as hopefully we start to move into some kind of openings in the next few weeks, just kind of seeing what those look like. And remember, you can always check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com.